one notable aspect of the Metro Center neighborhood. It's Springfield's arts hub. I do want to point out that arts and culture heroes here in Springfield, downtown, include the Springfield Symphony Orchestra, the Springfield Museums, the Springfield Community Music School, Art for the Soul Gallery, and the Springfield Cultural Partnership. And tonight, the Metro Center Association is especially celebrating the recent opening of this Hope Center for the Arts, a new hero. So we want to offer heartfelt thanks and enthusiastic praise to Hope Center's creative founder, Bob Bolduc, and Metro Center resident, Shira Cohen, whose website is called In the Spotlight Inc. Really cheers to them for partnering with Springfield Cultural Council also to offer tonight's vital event in tribute to Springfield native Eleanor Powell and in tribute to the city of Springfield and its arts hub. So cheers!
Thank you, Linda. So tonight, our speaker, Lisa Royere, is the co-author of the book Eleanor Powell, Born to Dance. And I'm just going to say you should buy a copy after the presentation. It is really well written, and I know that since I write film history books myself, and she did an excellent job, not only in portraying her life, but also a career assessment of her work. Powell was one of the most prominent dancers to ever appear on the screen. That is not a hyperbole, and if you're not super familiar with her work, you will be, and I think by the end of the presentation, you're going to see that, yes, every accolade she ever earned was truthful and deserved. This book of hers, that Lisa wrote, is a true insider's look into her life, as Lisa actually knew Eleanor Powell. By the way, Lisa's not working on a new book because, well, once you do one film history book, you need to do another film history book. I'm on number 9 right now. And her new book, by the way, is one that I'm very interested in, as it's about an actor who was a huge star in the 1930s and 40s and deserves rediscovery, just like Eleanor deserves rediscovery. And that actor's name was Irene Dunn. So after her presentation, there'll be time for questions and answers, and she also will be back at the table in the lobby selling her books. So please welcome Lisa Royere.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here, and I feel that it's extremely appropriate that this is National Tap Dance Month. What better month to honor Eleanor Powell? How many of you are familiar with her? Oh, that's a good number. Well, for those of you who are not, we have a little introduction video. by the Dance Masters of America, and that title was never taken away from her. Her talent was undeniable, as you can see. But as Fayard Nicholas of the Nicholas Brothers, himself one of the greatest tap dancers who ever lived, put it, she's not just the greatest female tap dancer, she's one of the greatest, period. Tonight we're going to take a closer look at one of the most talented and hardworking performers in Hollywood. We're going to see where she came from, which is no surprise to you, and how she built that technique, her devotion to her craft, and what it cost her. And we're going to wonder why a performer of this caliber remains so much less celebrated than she should be. Eleanor Tori Powell was born on November 21st on Allen Street, 175 Allen Street, right here in Springfield. She was born 3 days before her mother's 17th birthday. Her father, himself only 18 years old, abandoned the family soon after her birth, and her parents divorced when she was only 11 months old. She and her mother, Blanche, lived with Blanche's parents, Harold and Susie Torrey. They had modest financial needs, but they provided a stable, loving household for the family. And Blanche worked hard to contribute and did every job imaginable. She was a waitress, a bank teller, chambermaid, and during World War I, she worked at the armory, loading bullets into the belts to be sent overseas to the soldiers. On the left is the Powell home at 109 Allen Street, and on the right is the Torrey home at 175 Allen Street. So you see, it went too far from each other. This is where Eleanor spent her first years, but I will say that she moved around a lot in Springfield. She's lived practically everywhere. But she was a painfully shy child, and not exactly the profile you'd expect for somebody who would be a future Hollywood star. But when friends of the family suggested dance lessons might be a cure for her shyness, Blanche, her mother, decided to give it a try, and she scraped together the $1 per lesson. Eleanor enrolled at the H.P. Lane School of Dance on Worthington Street. Eleanor was immediately transported by the music and the movement, and she progressed quickly. After a year or two, she moved over to the Ralph McKernan studio, curiously at the exact same address on Worthington Street. I guess they had all the dance studios there. At his studio, Eleanor studied mainly classical ballet and acrobatic dance, and this gave her a solid foundation on which to build the future. Dance transformed Eleanor, no longer shy. Her growing passion and natural aptitude gave her confidence. Eleanor performed every chance she could get. Here she is at age 12 with her classmates at the Howard Elementary School in their production of Cinderella. She was the fairy queen, and they performed this production at the Technical High School auditorium. Even this early in her journey, she claimed, "I would rather dance than eat." Eleanor and her mother often spent summers in Atlantic City after her grandparents moved there in 1920, and it was possibly through this connection that she had the opportunity to perform at 2 social events when she was only 11. While her mother was working in one of the big hotels, Eleanor would spend her days on the beach. She was always practicing, dancing, turning cartwheels, and doing acrobatics, and she never failed to draw a crowd. One day, when she was 12, she was spotted by Gus Edwards of the Vaudeville Kitty Review. This led directly to her first professional engagement at the Ambassador Hotel. She had a regular spot in the Pompeian Grill, and she earned $7.50 a night for 3 nights a week. She wore this costume, which was made by her grandmother, and she danced to Japanese Sandman, performing the class routine that she had learned at McKernan's dance studio. Over the next 3 years, she began to make a name for herself as she moved into the more upscale nightclubs, even becoming mistress of ceremonies in one of them. And she met celebrities like Jack Benny and Eddie Cantor, who suggested that she might like to try her luck in New York because the kid was good. During all this time, she performed adagios and acrobatics, the Charleston, and she even won a black bottom contest. But she still had yet to perform a single tap step. In 1927, shortly before Eleanor's 15th birthday, Eleanor and Blanche moved to New York City. Eleanor managed to land a job on Broadway in The Optimist in 1928, doing her acrobatic routines. But as tap became more popular, it was almost impossible to find work without it. And as she put it, if you didn't tap, you were just tapped. Jack Donahue was a famous Broadway choreographer and dancer. He danced as a partner of Marilyn Miller. Eleanor enrolled at his new studio that he had just opened with Johnny Boyle. She paid $35 for a set of 10 lessons, but she hated it. At the first lesson, she fell behind from the very first step. Completely discouraged, she just wanted to quit, so she didn't go back the next day. But Jack Donahue, who hadn't actually been giving the lesson, Johnny Boyle was, he was sitting on a windowsill watching her, and apparently he saw something because he called her and convinced her to come back. At her next lesson, he sat on the floor, he took her ankles in his hands and moved her feet back and forth so she could feel the proper sensation. Then, to counteract the aerial tendencies she had learned from her years of ballet, he strapped her into an army belt with 2 sandbags on either side. And as she said, honey, I was riveted to the floor. She practiced like crazy until finally she had a breakthrough. And by the end of the series of lessons, she was at the front of the class, demonstrating the routine for the other students. Donahue decided to give her practice space in exchange for her helping teach. And she spent 8 and 10-hour days just practicing, going through the routines over and over and over again. Once she could tap, everything changed. She got a specialty number and a small role in a hit show called Follow Through that ran for a year and a half on Broadway. And it was during this run that the Dancing Masters of America, for the first time, awarded titles to the best male and female tap dancers in the country. And to keep the judging purely objective, they stood under the stage, judging only by sound. Eleanor won the female title, and the male title went to Bill Robinson, and it was the beginning of an important friendship. The two were often hired to perform together at private society parties in the homes of the wealthiest people in New York, like the Astors and the Vanderbilts. They were the king and queen of tap, and they even dressed the part. He would come on in long tails, and she would wear a pair with shorts. And Robinson also paid her ultimately the best compliment. He taught her the original choreography for his famous stair dance. The only other dancer that he taught that to was Shirley Temple. Over the next several years, Eleanor built an impressive Broadway resume. And she performed at some of New York's most prestigious venues. She appeared at the Paramount Theater with Bing Crosby. Also on the bill was John Bubbles, the father of rhythm tap. She studied his technique by lying on her stomach in the wings, watching him dance and trying to figure out what he was doing. And she said that he became so, he loved it so much that she did that he would play to her instead of to the audience. And then soon he was watching her too. And she had the chance to jam with him after the shows in the basement of the theaters. But even with these mentors, she worked really hard to develop her own style. And she would stay in the theater in between shows, practicing on the empty stage with her portable Victrola record player and her Fats Waller records until her feet were worn sore and she was exhausted. It was during this period that she developed her signature topspin tap. It's a multiple pirouette punctuated by toe tap accents as she turned, and it took her 3 years to perfect. She performed it so effortlessly that the audiences couldn't believe what they were seeing, and they always demanded encores. Eleanor actually made her first film appearance as a background dancer in the 1930 film Queen High, starring Ginger Rogers, who was 19 years old at the time. This was filmed at Paramount's Astoria Studios in New York. But it wasn't until 4 years later that producer George White invited her to come to Hollywood, and he offered her a part in his film, George White's 1935 Scandals. This is George White with Eleanor and Bill Robinson on the Fox lot. Robinson was there making the first of his films with Shirley Temple, The Little Colonel. Eleanor's first experience in Hollywood was far from typical. George White ran his film set in a very unconventional way, the way he ran his stage rehearsals. He rarely started before mid-afternoon, and by that time, most of the cast and crew who had been waiting around the set, swapping stories and imbibing, were in no condition to work. And on a good day, George White completed only 2 shots. As a result of this, Eleanor waited a whole month before it was her turn to go before the camera. She only had a tiny role in her number, and she had less than 5 minutes of screen time. She was completely unimpressed by Hollywood. Eleanor and Blanche packed up and went straight back to New York. And back in New York, Eleanor went to a sneak preview of this film with some dancer friends, and she discovered that the sound was 1 frame out of sync, which made her look like her taps were out of time. She was mortified, she was disgusted, and she decided she would never set foot in Hollywood again. However, in the meantime, MGM had seen some of her screen tests, and they were so impressed with this young dancer. But when they approached her, she first turned them down flat. They persisted, so she did what she thought would get rid of them. She asked for an outrageous sum of money. She asked for $1,000 a week, which is what some of her Broadway peers were getting. To her surprise, MGM said yes. So she asked for more money and an actual role in the film. To her, that was almost as if she said, I want $1 million in my dressing room painted in gold. MGM said yes. So now she had run out of excuses. And she had time to kill before her next Broadway production, so she and Blanche packed up their bags again and headed back to Hollywood. MGM tested Eleanor again once she got there, asking her to demonstrate every kind of dance that she could do. Tap, ballet, acrobatic. And they were so impressed. When Mr. Louis B. Mayer told her he wanted to test her for the lead, she looked him in the eye and she said, Mr. Mayer, you can't do that. I don't know anything about the camera. And Mr. Mayer, head of the studio, was stunned. And he said, my young lady, you don't talk to me like that. I'm the head of the studio. If I want to make a test with you, if I want to put you in the lead, I'm going to do it. So she made the test, and guess what? She got the lead. She was the newest member of MGM's stable of stars, and she had done everything in her power to avoid it. This was her first film that you saw the clip from, Broadway Melody of 1936. And this gave her the perfect showcase for her talent. She became an overnight star. But even as she had worked so hard to perfect her style on Broadway, in Hollywood she knew that she couldn't rest. Her career was launched, and now with each film she had to continue to develop numbers that would be unique and that would set her apart. She conceived and choreographed every single number herself. Her choreography and technique were in a class by themselves, and it was never so evident as in this number, done without music. She was playing a dual role, if you wonder why she had a white wig on. She constantly experimented with new ideas. She jumped rope while tapping. She learned an authentic hula from a native Hawaiian woman. She taught a dog to dance. She wielded a bullfighter's cape. She learned Morse code to be a dancing spy. And she even learned to rope from a real cowboy. Whatever a number required, she went to the primary source and she learned it for real. Each dance was researched, rehearsed, and executed with the same exacting standard. She also had quite a few ideas that were discarded, but that were strangely prophetic. She abandoned her idea of working with metal trash can lids, but her idea was not as far-fetched as it might have seemed, because Gene Kelly did a dance like that with a similar theme, and It's Always Fair Weather. And when she wanted to create a number on skates, she went to Bill Morgan at Capezio, the Hollywood theatrical shoe store, and she worked on a prototype of a tap shoe that had tiny wheels embedded in the soles. She was never able to use that on film, but several decades later, I think you've all seen the sneakers with the wheels in the soles. Because of all these creative ideas, because they all took time to develop, MGM did something that was unprecedented. In April of 1936, they modified her contract and they gave her an annual 12-week period paid, devoted entirely to the preparation of her numbers. It was an exceptional clause that no other performer had at the time. And from the very beginning of her time at MGM, Eleanor was involved in every aspect of her numbers, from the first idea to the final cut. And here are a few examples of the magnitude of some of her sets. Most of these were for her finale numbers. Each number started with an idea. She would sit down with art director Meryl Pye, who was part of the celebrated team overseen by Cedric Gibbons, the most distinguished art director in Hollywood. And she'd explain her vision, her complete vision for a number. If she wanted a fountain, a staircase, a park, she described it, and Pye would sketch it out. But due to budget considerations, things didn't always work out as planned. When the set for Broadway Rhythm, the number that opened tonight's performance, came in 10 feet shorter than she had been promised, she had to redesign her choreography on the spot. Creating a dance number for a film was a process in itself. It began with the music. Eleanor would perform her choreography in ballet slippers on a mat, while the orchestra recorded the music. She did this so the tempo would be right. And then the number was filmed silently on the soundstage. So many MGM actors came to see her dance that the studio even put up bleachers for them. Finally, she'd watch herself on screen while listening to the music through headphones and record her taps separately. So every single tap would be clean, precise, and perfectly synchronized with the music that you hear in the final film. A day dubbing the taps alone could take up to 16 hours. Once the number was filmed, her work still wasn't done. She sat with the film editor, Blanche Sewell, to make sure that the final cut preserved the integrity of her choreography. She learned early on that a cutter who didn't understand dance could inadvertently remove the most intricate steps and leave only the easy ones. Sewell welcomed her involvement, and the two became friends. Now we're going to take a look at some of her most unique numbers. For Honolulu in 1939, she traded in her top hat and tails for a hula skirt. She learned a real hula from a native Hawaiian, and she did film that part. But in this part, being Eleanor Powell, she just had to put a tap to it. been her. And watch for the end of this number because you'll see what a big production it was. Eleanor's number required her to dance atop a row of massive drums. The tallest was 16 feet off the ground. No edge, no railing, and her own feet were blocked from her view by her costume. They were shooting outside at night, but they didn't take into account that the fog that often rolled in from the Pacific would coat every surface and become slick and slippery. When Eleanor stepped onto the first drum, she nearly slid right off. She said, "Honey, I was like Sonia Henny out there." She took a break while the crew covered every drum with a cork for traction. It helped, but Eleanor who was usually a daredevil, was a little bit nervous. So, to lighten things up, her co-stars, Nelson Eddy and Ray Bolger, were down below with an ambulance, and they were dressed in red cross uniform, and they said, "Hey, Ellie, we're down here if you need us." Eleanor had been toying with an idea of dancing with a dog for quite some time. She first started with an idea of dancing with a German Shepherd, but that did not pan out. For Lady Be Good, she decided she wanted to try again, but it had to be just the right dog. So she auditioned dogs of every size and shape, and none of them had what she was looking for. Finally, a prop boy mentioned that his daughter had a very smart little fox terrier at home named Buttons, who was really good at learning tricks. So Eleanor took Buttons home with her for 6 weeks and trained him herself. Once he got used to the sound of her taps, she taught him his choreography. He learned to walk through her legs as she danced, leap over her extended leg, and jump through hoops formed by her arms. And by the time they returned to the studio, Buttons was a real pro. Eleanor said that he turned out to be a real ham. He would get so excited to perform that his little body would quiver all over. And this number actually launched Buttons' film career. He made another film in 1948 with Bing Crosby called The Emperor Waltz. First ship Hawaii in 1942, Eleanor had the opportunity to work with Tommy Dorsey and his orchestra, and more importantly with their star drummer, Buddy Rich. Not only was he one of the most influential drummers of the time, but he was also an excellent tap dancer himself, and the two had a deep mutual respect for each other. Eleanor always considered herself as a percussionist, as a dancer, as much a percussionist as a dancer. And she liked to say, a tap dancer is just a frustrated drummer. The number I'll Take Tallulah, which you're about to see, doesn't have massive production sets with hundreds of extras, just Eleanor and pure energy. She flies through the set, dancing on tables and chairs and swinging across the pool on a ring, ending in a synchronized drum duel with Buddy Rich. But that swing across the pool did not go smoothly on the first take. Eleanor had incorporated a swan dive into the arms of the man standing on the platform in the middle of the pool. And then, well, they had rehearsed it perfectly, and the camera rolled, and the man misjudged his catch. And Eleanor ended up in the water. She was hanging on the edge trying to preserve her makeup, and the man panicked and dove in to help. But he didn't help. He grabbed her by the waist and pulled her down. She was completely wet, and in the process, he tore all the ligaments in her arm.
Ooh.
Yeah, but they finally got it together, and they did this. For I Do'd It in 1943, Eleanor wanted to do a rodeo-themed tap dance number, another idea that she'd been considering for about 4 years when she began taking fancy roping, twirling, and riding lessons from Western star Luke Gibson. But this time she hired Sam Garrett, a champion trick roper from Oklahoma, taught by Will Rogers himself. But she underestimated how difficult it would be. You see the metal part of the rope where at the bottom of the loop called the hondo was very heavy, and once the rope She did it like jumping back and forth through it. Once that rope got spinning at 50 miles per hour, the Honda would hit her in the head and knocked her cold a couple times until she decided that she needed to rehearse with a football helmet and shoulder pads until she learned. It took her 6 weeks of intense work to learn, and she said she had gotten so good at it that she could lasso anybody who came into the studio soundstage. And on the day of filming, when she had to throw 8 lassos in a row, which you will see in this number, people were taking, the crew, they were taking bets, and big bets, she said, to see whether or not she could do it in one take. Well, she did it, and Sam Garrett was so impressed with her, with what she had accomplished, that he suggested that she leave the movies behind and become a rodeo star. In 1942, she met a young actor named Glenn Ford. They fell in love and married in October 1943. Eleanor, by that time, had become disillusioned with her career and decided it would be better to retire while she was still on top. She had her son Peter in February of 1945 and was content to stay home for a little while. But when Peter was 2, she went out on the road in her nightclub act, and the money she earned helped put a down payment on their house. She made her final film appearance in The Duchess of Idaho in 1950 with Esther Williams and Van Johnson. And Williams recalled how hard Eleanor worked on this one cameo number until her feet bled. Eleanor taught Sunday school at the Beverly Hills Presbyterian Church for 12 years, and she was so good with her students that she was approached with an idea to do a children's Sunday school on TV. It was the first of its kind, and each week she featured different children and a special guest. And the show won 5 Emmys. To the public, the Fords appeared to have one of the happiest marriages in Hollywood, but in reality, it was rocky from the start, and after 16 difficult years, Eleanor filed for divorce in 1959. When she left her marriage, she was broke, and she decided all she could do was to make a comeback. So she was 48 years old, by the way. She worked diligently for 9 months to get back into shape, dancing 8 hours a day, and she lost over 30 pounds, but she was in the best shape of her life. And in 1961, at age 48, she opened in Las Vegas with great success. The Queen of Tap was reigning again. She chose to make her final appearance at the Storlton Music Fair in the hometown of Springfield, Massachusetts, in June 1964. Mayor Charles Ryan proclaimed June 11th Eleanor Powell Day, so she's had two. And she was given the key to the city. And the citizens of Springfield turned out en masse for a parade in her honor down Main Street, and she reconnected with many old friends. On a more personal level, she was finally able to meet her half-sister, Judy Powell Arno. Judy's son Scott is here in the audience with us tonight, and these are Scott's parents with Eleanor. And Eleanor's grandfather, Harold Torrey, on the left, lived in Springfield until he died at age 96. She led a quiet life for the next several years until That's Entertainment came out in 1974 and introduced her to a whole new generation of fans. She loved interacting with young people especially, and I can tell you from personal experience, because that's me, that her warmth and generosity were absolutely genuine. She danced for the last time in public at a benefit for the Motion Picture Country Home in 1980, and her last televised appearance was at the AFI tribute to Fred Astaire in April of 1981, where she received a well-deserved standing ovation. She died on February 11th, 1982. Today, people are still discovering Eleanor Powell. Maybe you today discovered her through her clips on YouTube and her films on DVD and Blu-ray and on Turner Classic Movies, for which we must be all grateful. Tonight I've shared just a few stories with you, but if you want the full story of her remarkable life, we have a book that Paula and I wrote. Eleanor Powell, Born to Dance, published by University Press of Kentucky. And I could show any of her numbers. They are all excellent. They are all good. But I've saved maybe the best for last. Frank Sinatra said about the number you're about to see, you can wait around and hope, but you'll never see the likes of this again. questions? There should be a microphone circulator.
I just have a quick question for you. How did you get to know her? You mentioned it was a great picture of you there. How did you get to know her?
I met her at a film festival. They were showing a retrospective of her films, and I had wanted to meet her for some time, and I kept missing her every single time. She had just been where I was. And so finally, I went to see two of her movies, and I thanked the theater manager for showing them. He said, "Oh, she was here last night." I said, "Great." And he said, "But don't worry, next week we're celebrating her birthday, and she'll be back." And so I met her, and she was wonderful. We talked the first time for about half an hour, and I felt like I had always known her, and she invited me right off the bat to come over to her house and watch some film clips. So.
Hi, Lisa. Angela Grout from
Hi,
Royere.
Angela.
She was on my show last week. We talked a lot about
It's
this.
nice to see you.
Nice to see you. I have a question about her son. So you were saying she got divorced and then she made a comeback. Where was her son during that time?
He lived with her.
He did. So
the
he
reason
traveled.
She waited so long. He was in some boarding school for a while, but she had to wait until he was old enough because she was afraid that I think you have to be 14 at the time, right? In California, the child could choose which parent to live with, and she was afraid that if he didn't have the option of choosing, that it would be chosen for him because Glenn was making more money and everything. So she waited.
And did she teach him to tap dance?
Pardon?
Did she teach her son to tap dance?
No, it wasn't of course. But she wanted to teach her grandchild.
Oh, thank you. If you could recommend what movie to start with, if you don't know much about it, what movie would you recommend?
If you're a Fred Astaire fan, the last one we saw, the last clip we saw is from Broadway Melody of 1940. That's a good place to start. I think one of my favorites is Broadway Melody of 1936, where with the number with that tux in it. That's wonderful because you see everything she did, and she just dances, and she does an imitation of Katharine Hepburn. It's wonderful. And there's also Born to Dance with Jimmy Stewart, which is delightful. They're all fun, but I would start with some of the earlier ones, I think. Wait.
You talked about her immediate family. What about her extended family, like her nieces, her nephews? Did she have any?
She didn't know them until her nephew's here. But she didn't know, because they're half siblings, she did not know her father until she met him when she was like 20, I think. And he came backstage when she was in a show in New York. And they didn't really have much contact. But she did meet her brothers, who were older than Scott's mother. And one of them, she got him a job at MGM. But she didn't really have contact with, I don't know if they had kids, did they? Besides you? Anyway, she didn't really have.
When you met her, how old were you and how old was she?
Oh,
Which birthday?
I was a baby.
Oh.
I was late teens, and she was 61, I think. Yeah.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. With a very young spirit, let me tell you. Yes.
Can you tell us about Arturo Toscanini and what he had to say?
Oh,
They're pretty
sure.
solid.
You like that story. So the great conductor, Arturo Toscanini, came to see her on the set of Broadway Melody of 1940. And in that film, she does a ballet. And so she was all excited because he was coming and she was going to do something classical. And so he came and she danced for him, and he said, "Oh, no, I don't want to see that. I want to see the dance with the noise." So she she had to have people pull up the floorboards, or pull up the thing that was covering the floorboards, because she wouldn't have had any sound. And she said everybody was so nervous that they just couldn't, they couldn't function. So she was pulling up the thing over that was covering the floorboards. She changed and she went back and she danced and she danced and she danced and she danced. And he said, "Okay, you stop now." and she got later a letter from him saying the 3 things that I loved best were the sunset, I can't remember the second one, and Eleanor Powell's dancing. Do you remember?
The Grand Canyon.
The Grand, and I'm from Arizona. The sunset, the Grand Canyon, and Eleanor Powell's dancing. Quite a compliment from the maestro. Anybody else?
I just have another quick question. You said in 1959, when she got divorced from Glenn Ford, that she became broke. I was just wondering if she was making so much money in Hollywood and such a big star. What do you know? Because she stopped doing films.
She stopped. She had been not working. She hadn't been working for 16 years, and she had to go out on tour to get the down payment for the house. So they weren't. I guess it's expensive to live in Hollywood. Yeah. Art.
Well, Lisa, it's such a pleasure to finally meet you in person. We knew each other online for several years now, but all I can say is God bless you. Thank you very much for this beautiful presentation, for writing that book with Paula, whom I also know through social media. But all I can say is, long live the Queen. I absolutely love her and everything she did. But I would like to know from you, what is your favorite anecdote with the goat herself, as we would call we young people? I mean, you probably have so many beautiful stories of her. I mean, she sang with Nelson Eddy, who's like my role model. She danced.
No, she did not sing the Nelson.
No. I'd rather Jeanette just handle those.
Yeah, Jeanette.
Yeah. I just want to know, what's your favorite? Well, she did sing with Robert. Well, she was done by Margie Ling, anyways.
Yes.
What's your favorite anecdote?
My favorite anecdote? Oh my goodness. I think the buttons one, but my favorite part is just the way she was with me, and how the things that she told me that fortunately she did, because we were able to put them in the book, and just knowing her as a person is my favorite part. Better than an anecdote. She was wonderful.
Hello. This performance has been just incredible, and more people should see it.
I understand it. Springfield, you should be proud.
Do you think it might be done again?
Possibly.
Yeah, I think it should be, because I've never heard of her. I never even knew this, and she's fantastic.
Oh, I'm so glad
I
you
mean,
said that.
every noise that she makes with those feet is right on.
Yes.
There's no hesitation or blurring or anything. She's a magnificent drummer.
Yes.
I mean, this should be known by everybody.
Well, fortunately, people are discovering her through YouTube by complete chance, and you should read some of the comments. It's amazing. Some really young people and people who are just discovering her, they're like, whoa, where has she been all my life?
Right. Well, thank you so much for bringing her to our attention.
Thank you.
We really
Thank you for
appreciate
coming.
it.
Thank you.
Thank you. I just want to repeat once again how pleased I am to see this. In fact, the ancient person that I am, age 86, I've never heard of her. And I think it's been the case that you see Ginger Rogers and Fred Astaire dancing together, and that's what I assumed the great tap dancing pair would be, but not with Eleanor. And certainly she was magnificent to watch with Fred Astaire in the last clip that you showed. I am very curious to know, though, when did she die, and what were her last years like?
She died in February of 1982. She had cancer, and her last years were full of joy. She had a grandson who was 5 years old when she died, and he was the light of her life. And she did a lot of babysitting, and she just, she wasn't a star when you knew her. She was just a loving mother and grandmother. And,
So she was dancing until
she danced a couple of years publicly. The picture that I showed with, she had a red blouse on. She danced at a benefit for the actors, the motion picture country home for retired actors. So she went out there and she did that, but she hadn't danced, I think, professionally since the 60s. But she was always tapping in her kitchen and around the house.
that's what I was curious about.
Yeah, those feet never stopped.
Yes, because you said 1982. So
1982, she was 69 years old.
Yeah,
Yeah,
she looked wonderful on stage then.
Mhm.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
To follow up, so why do you think she was kind of lost
I
and
think-
her legacy was not better remembered?
I think because she didn't make enough films, and I think the time she made the films played into that. Films became, a lot of the films that you might remember, the great musicals, are in color. They're from the Arthur Freed unit with Judy Garland or Fred Astaire. Fred Astaire managed to do films from 1933 all the way through, but she stopped, and I think her era was a very short one, and that probably plays a role in it. And maybe her films weren't shown as much on TV back in the day, but it's a shame that people don't recognize her as one of the greats when she obviously is. Angela has a
I
question.
just wanted to say one more thing. I believe Fred Astaire's regular partner always claimed that she was a good dancer, and she did it in heels and backwards.
Yeah, she does say that in her.
But when she's dancing with him in this clip that you showed, she was just as good as he was.
She was better.
Or better, yeah. She was doing it in heels, too.
Yeah, she was. She didn't have to make any plans, she just did it. Yeah, her forte was solo dancing too. So, she held her own.
For how long have you been working on this book? And did she know you were going to do a book about her?
Well, sort of. Way back when I saw That's Entertainment and discovered her, it wasn't very easy to see the films. And we were very lucky that sometimes an old movie theater would show these retrospectives. And Paula and I were both really wowed by her, and we wanted to know more. So we started back then as teenagers collecting stills and going to the libraries and looking, researching as best as we could. And she knew it, but I'm not sure how, she thought. I don't know, sometimes she participated and told me lots of stuff, and you can use this in the book. But the original book was supposed to be the films of Eleanor Powell, a book of stills, because we knew that we weren't really ready or capable at that time to write a full biography. So we continued our research, and a couple of years after she died, we got access to the legal files at MGM, which was really helpful in giving us a lot of details in some of the films. But I moved to France and lived there for 25 years, didn't come back until 2010. And it wasn't until COVID that Paula said, "Lisa, do you want to start this again?" And I said, "No." It's a lot of work. And then I came around really quickly. And we started our research from the beginning. We had our files We had always kept our files, but we started everything. And it's great now because everything is online. We can get newspaper articles from all over. And even today, they keep adding more and more. We were able to go to archives, and it's so much, we had so much more information than we would have back in the day. And also, Eleanor had said to me at one time, I feel like nobody really knows me except you. And I wanted her to be known as a person as well as a dancer. And that's what we tried to do.
I recently saw an interview with Peter for her son and about a book he wrote about his father.
You need a microphone. Sorry. Now you get two.
I recently saw an interview with Peter Ford, her son, and he had written a book about his very famous father, Glenn. Did you speak with Peter at all in writing this book? Did you interview him, and what did he have to say?
I knew Peter back in the day. I used to babysit his oldest son. But unfortunately for this book, when I approached him, he didn't really respond. I'm not sure why. I think he may have had a project himself, but no, he had no input in this book. But Eleanor did.
We have a friend that has been trying since 2014 to get Eleanor Powell recognized here in the city of Springfield and has had no luck whatsoever. She even approached MGM when they first moved here. She wanted them to have a room dedicated to her. They wouldn't do a thing for her. Nobody in Springfield did. And I'm so glad you did.
I think she should have a plaque somewhere. Thank you all for coming. I really
The statue, mind you.
Yeah, a big statue. Yeah, Dr. Seuss has one. Why not her?
Oh, he's from here too? I didn't know.
Oh, yeah. Okay. I think that's all. Oh, one more?
Just a thank you, a shout out to Sharon Cohen for making this happen, and I think we're going to hear a word from her.
Yes, thank you, Sharon, for your tireless work.
Or did you want to say something?
Yeah, really quick. I had the idea to do this tribute because I worked at Storyton Tavern, Storyton Music House, way back when I was in high school. And I would get free tickets to every performance, one of which was Eleanor Powell, and that was the one that was discussed earlier. I never heard of her either, so I gave my tickets to my mother and a friend. And my mother was just thrilled. And then I started doing a little research. Oh, I guess she was really good. And then I thought, what has the city done? I didn't know that Mayor Ryan had done a tribute in the 1960s. But we're doing it again in the 21st century.
Yeah, it needs to be done. Thank you all for coming.
Let's give her another hand, Lisa. Lisa will be in the lobby to sell books. I expect every one of you to buy a goddamn book. She'll take cash. She'll take